you've managed to run a company that's grown from nothing. I mean, I saw you at a card table 5 years ago, and now Siebel is going to break $1 billion in revenues this year, or next year, close?
I think it's likely next year.
Next year, okay. And what's the market capitalization of the company?
I think it's somewhere between $7 and $8 billion right now.
And you just got picked as the fastest growing technology company of your size in the world or something like that.
Actually, I think a recent issue of Forbes magazine has us listed as the fastest growing company in America in the last 3 years, and then a recent study done by Deloitte and Touche shows us as the fastest growing company in Silicon Valley in the past 5 years.
Well, this is like cerebral hemorrhage stuff. I mean,
700,000% growth, I think is the number.
And you gone, well, I saw you with 4 employees, and then you have 3,500 now?
Today we have 2,700 employees in 24 countries.
How do you manage growth that fast? This is a lot different than starting a company. Running a company that's growing that fast is a whole different set of skills. How do you do it?
I think that we have become the fastest growing company in America, the fastest growing application software company in the history of the industry. I think that at the genesis of this is the idea that we're always building a large global company. You were there, you saw it. Even though there were 5 of us, there were 10 of us, there were 20 of us. We are never building a Silicon Valley startup. We're never building a company with the idea that, gee, we might do an IPO someday. Our objective was to build a large, global, leading company in the area of customer management systems, sales, marketing, customer service.
Well, one thing I noticed from the very beginning, this wasn't like a normal startup. I mean, this wasn't 4 guys sitting in a booth at Denny's, and you weren't running around in, Grateful Dead T-shirts. You acted like you were a giant company when you were sitting at a folding table. I mean, you always had a suit on, and you behaved as if you were a billion-dollar company when you were like a $4 company. Is that a product of your background?
No, I think that we wanted to approach the problem with very high levels of professionalism. The objective here was to build a great company. Was to build one of the world's leading companies. And the people that we attracted to the business, and the people that we maintained in the business, were really highly trained professionals. I mean, professionals in every respect. And so the way that we comported ourselves, the way that we dressed, the way that we deal with the customers, the way we deal with technology issues, marketing issues, we thought professionalism was a very important aspect.
I mean, it was an interesting image with a bowl of jelly beans, and that was like your lunchroom, and you're all running around in suits talking to Fortune 500 corporations and acting as if you're this giant. When you're talking on the phone, it was as if there was this giant corporation behind you, when in fact it was a folding table and a phone on the floor.
A $60 folding table that we bought at one of these auctions from another company that I think went bankrupt. That was the desk for the first.
Now, you couldn't have done this when you were 22. I mean, we hear all this talk now about these dot-com startups, and they're all kids, kids with nose rings that are 23 years old. You couldn't have done what you did at 23, could you?
No, and I think that those cultures are appropriate cultures for what those companies are accomplishing. But I think for what we set out to do was build a large, global, leading enterprise in its space would require a group of pretty tried, tested, proven, and experienced professionals to execute that business plan.
But you did 2 very interesting things when you started Siebel Systems. One of them is you went out, and as your partner in the startup, who is currently the president and COO, chief operating officer of the firm, you got a woman, Pat House, which makes her, until recently, the highest-ranking woman in Silicon Valley. Did that cross your mind? I mean, there is a gender gap in Silicon Valley. There aren't very many women in executive roles in this town.
It never. I mean, Pat House serves today. She co-founded the business with me. She's the executive vice president at Siebel Systems, and Pat and I founded the business together. Pat and I had worked together at Oracle Corporation for some years, and then we had been associates in the business when she was an executive at Frame and I was an executive at Gain. Pat is a person for whom I had developed enormous professional respect, and the fact that we found it. This was a gender-neutral discussion. And is today. Pat is, without question, maybe one of the most talented people in the information technology business, certainly the most talented person with whom I've had an opportunity to work in my professional career. And I think this company would not be where it is today without Pat House. So, yeah. But the fact that it was a female was absolutely irrelevant in any of the discussions, in any of the thought processes, and honestly, it's irrelevant today. I think that this was a business that was easily financed without venture capital. Now, the way that we did it also is we didn't spend very much money. We had the crummiest space in Silicon Valley. Our offices were in East Palo Alto. It was, I think, 11 cents a square foot for the office space. All of our furniture was the crummiest furniture that we could buy at auction. And almost all of the people in the company for the first 18 months, worked for no salary. They worked for just pure
Well, that's
equity.
the final step in this finance scheme of yours, which was you allowed every employee to choose what percentage of their salary could be devoted to sweat equity. And I know there were several people who actually basically went home to their husband or wife and said, we're living on your salary for the next year. We're going to take everything I do and make it into stock. And those people made tens of millions of dollars.
It turned out to be a pretty good investment. A fundamental premise of this company is that we wanted it to be an employee-owned company. Okay, we wanted I mean, this was like a Marxist dream. We wanted
That's when you go to the University of Illinois.
We wanted the workers to own the means of production, and in a funny way, we have this incredible capitalist success story that where the workers own the means of production, and this is what we wanted.
Yeah, but let me add one wrinkle in that, and that, in a sense, you risk sowing the seeds of your own future problems, though. When Siebel went public, an awful lot of the people in that company made an awful lot of money. Like several hundred people made upwards of $1 million.
A lot, yeah, a lot.
Then you got the problem of why they need to work anymore. Why should they come to the office every morning? Once they get fully vested and they liquidate, exercise their options, they're pretty comfortable. Why? Didn't you risk losing everybody over time, having this huge attrition once it reached a certain point?
We have to look. I think that was a very real risk for the company. And like other information technology companies, our stocks have gone up and our stock goes down. I mean, it varies a lot. But we've never been focused upon stock price. We've never been focused on an IPO. We've never been focused upon market valuation. When you come in our lobby, there's no ticker tape that shows what the stock price is today. You know that, you've been there. Our sole focus, our sole driving core focus here is to build one of the world's great companies. This is why we're here.
Let's talk about your background a little bit. You grew up in Chicago?
Grew up in the North Shore of Chicago, a town called Wilmette, Illinois.
What was that like?
Suburban
town?
It was a suburban town north of Chicago, a bedroom community, reasonably upscale, close to Lake Michigan, and I think it was a great place to grow up.
Were you a runner?
I was not a runner. In high school, I went to high school in Minnesota.
The reason I asked that sounds like a strange question, but didn't you do some work with Runner's World for a while or something early on in your career?
No, I was in the book publishing business, and I published, when I got out of undergraduate school, I was in the book publishing business, and at that point, we published a book associated with running by our mutual friend, Rich Carlgard. And so that was my experience with running at that time.
Okay, so let's go back to sports in school. What'd you do?
At school, I played hockey and I wrestled.
You were a wrestler. What weight?
Well, I was not. I forget what weight. Honestly, I wasn't very big in high school. Not very big now, but I forget what weight.
So, did that help later on? I mean, wrestling is sort of a solitary, focused, obsessive kind of sport.
And hockey is a team sport.
Right. So,
hockey is a team sport. And later on, I was involved in college. I was involved in martial arts a little bit.
What did your folks do?
My mother was a housewife. We had 7 children in our family.
7 children?
7 children. So it was a
Where were you in the pack?
I'm 6 of 7, and we have. My father was an attorney in Chicago, and he was a prominent, I think, successful attorney, primarily in business law.
Okay. Why didn't you pursue the law? I guess you had too many older brothers and sisters doing that.
That's a good question. My grandfather was an attorney, my father was an attorney, my eldest brother was an attorney, and I don't know why I didn't go there, but I was very interested in ideas related to engineering and science and medicine and how the way we think about these problems evolved over the centuries. When I went to graduate school, I became very interested in information technology and the way I thought information technology might change the world, and I very much wanted to be part of that.
A lot of entrepreneurs exhibit entrepreneurship at a really early age. Were you that kind of person? I mean, did you have like a lemonade stand? Did you have your own little business as a kid?
Oh, sure, we had little businesses. I mean, when I was in high school during
Without
summers.
many brothers and sisters, you just sell to them.
You could. But during high school, I cut logs for a living, and then during summers in college, we had a painting business, and we would paint houses. And this is how we made a little money to keep going. But I can't say I have any dramatic stories like Michael Dell, where I started at the age of 15 and the rest is, dropped out by 18 and the rest is history. But I think I exhibited some entrepreneurial tendencies, but on a very low level.
You went to University of Illinois?
University of Illinois.
Champaign-Urbana?
Champaign-Urbana for a long time. And
you got like 3 degrees or something?
3 degrees from there. 1 in history, 1 in business, and 1 in computer science.
Okay, tell me about the history one. That's the odd man out in that group.
Well, that was, I think that I went to school to learn fundamental skills: how to read, how to write, how to communicate. And in history, I was very interested in history, and I studied the history of ideas, history of science, history of philosophy. And I think that I learned a great deal there in studying these things that affected the way I have behaved in recent years and the way I behave today professionally. So I think that was a very, very valuable background.
Now there's this moment, and it appears over and over in the story of technology. People are in the Midwest. They reach a certain point in their careers, usually right out of college. They have graduate degrees. And then they come west. And they come out to Silicon Valley. Now, why did you come out? You had a nice little gig going with this book publishing thing. I mean, why suddenly make this sideways move into IT?
You know, I would say my career was affected very much by a guy, a sociologist from Harvard by the name of Daniel Bell. And Dan Bell wrote an article that was republished by the MIT Press in the late 70s, at which he put forth this idea of the post-industrial society. And I mean, this was a pretty prescient article. And you know, he hypothesized that we were about to undergo a change in the underlying structure of the economy on the order of the Industrial Revolution. Well, now this is all very common, and we read about it every day. But back then, it was pretty leading stuff. And I was very, very affected by this article.
This was an idea whose time had come.
Yes, and I understood. I had come out of the book publishing business, and in the book publishing business, we were essentially applying 14th century technology, you know, the Gutenberg press, 14th century technology, to deliver information, to entertain, and to persuade. And I thought this whole post-industrial society, this whole I was learning in what we say north of Green Street at the campus, the engineering campus at the University of Illinois at Champaign, was that these new information technologies were going to basically replace this Gutenberg press. And this is how, in the future, we would be delivering information to business people. This is how we would provide the means to inform, to entertain, to persuade. And I very much wanted to be part of that. The early days of Oracle were really, these were very exciting times. In other words, I think
because in its day, it was the fastest company.
It was. Oracle grew 100% a year for 11 years, and that was pretty rapid growth in those days.
They got to $1 billion faster than any company in history.
Yeah, that's true. And it was, 100% a year. Those were big numbers in the early '80s. Now it's not so big, but today those were big numbers. And it was really the professional experience of a lifetime. I think the average age at Oracle might have been 23 or 24 years old, and there were a bunch of young, bright, enthusiastic people who were out to change the world, and they were on something of a mission, and it was a great place to work.
So you grow with the corporation.
I grew
within 5 years. It's a $1 billion corporation. It's got several thousand employees.
So when I left in 1990, I think it was $1.2 billion. It had about 12,000 employees, if I'm not mistaken.
And where were you on the org chart?
I was the group vice president of Oracle USA.
Okay, and what were the responsibilities there?
At that time, I was responsible for marketing worldwide. I was responsible for all the alliances, all the OEMs, all the VAR relationships, and direct marketing, telesales, telemarketing, these aspects of the business.
You got married in there, too, somewhere, didn't you?
I got married when I was at Oracle in 1986. I got married.
And your wife worked there, too. You both worked at the same company at the time?
Stacy worked at Oracle, it's true.
What was that like? Is that difficult, working with your wife in the same company?
Well, it was. I don't think it was difficult. We worked in different organizations. She didn't work for me, and I didn't work for her. We worked in different organizations, and it was I think it was pretty nice. Stacy, it was a great. I think it was great circumstances that we were able to meet there.
Now, at some point, Oracle solidifies in this giant corporation. You're right up there near the top. It becomes untenable for you. And I've read articles about all the people during that era and the problems they had and why they left and sort of the repercussions of leaving Oracle. What was it like to quit? What compelled you to finally walk out of there?
Well, I think that Oracle was a situation, in 1990 they were running out of management. The infrastructure was not there, the systems were not there, the place was clearly out of control.
That's when they had their big crisis.
This is when they were just about to hit the wall. And and it was, an incredibly aggressive place. I think that the philosophy was very much about winning at all costs. I think that from the top, that any means would justify the end. And it
so
became.
Did you have a moral dilemma behind it?
Yeah, I think this became something of a moral dilemma, and it was just something I personally couldn't stomach anymore. And so I basically left the company. I took a leave of absence because that was the easiest way out.
I mean, did you wake up one morning and look across the breakfast table at Stacy and say, "This is it. We just can't do this anymore. It's wrong"?
I think it just became, as the numbers got bigger and bigger, and things became harder and harder, and the systems in Oracle became more and more strained. I think that there was pressure from the top to engage in activities that were more and more questionable. And I personally didn't want to be part of it.
I'm curious about something. A very interesting turning point occurred in your life 2 or 3 years ago. Up until then, you know, you'd been a vice president at Oracle. Your name was out there a little bit. You hit the papers with the sale of Gain. The success of Siebel Systems has gotten you a fair amount of attention. But now all of a sudden, you got the shooting star. You got the fastest growing company around. You're doing TV commercials. I almost jumped out of my chair one night in the middle of Monday Night Football, and all of a sudden there you are on the screen. You become a public figure now. You become a subject of attention. How do you deal with that change? Why did you choose to do it? I mean, just having your name on the company already puts you out there in the public eye, but now you're really out there in the public eye. Why do it? And is it worth it?
Well, I think it's a very good question, and I think that, you know, it's difficult. I mean, it comes along. It's one of the trappings of the success of the business. It's not something that we're seeking out, but it is happening, and I think that, you know, the effect of it is pretty humbling. Okay, the effect of it is that, you know, to the extent that you're offered up as a role model to other individuals that might want to go down a similar road, or other companies that might want to follow this path, I think it's humbling. I think some responsibility is put on your shoulders to try to set an example for you know, to communicate core values that might benefit other people. Core values like building a quality company. Core values like doing whatever it takes to make sure the customer succeeds. Core values like treating employees well and trying to build a working environment that's perceived as a great working environment. And you know, rather than these, I think, more transitory discussions that you see many chief executives focused upon about, you know, being, you know, great visionaries or makers of insanely great technology, or these great entrepreneurs, or, you know, all this silliness. I recognize what's really taking place here. You know, what's taking place here is we are living in Silicon Valley in the midst of an economic miracle unprecedented in the history of mankind. And many of us find ourselves here in the right place at the right time and have been enormously fortunate. And if you look at the real core of many of these success stories, it's not great visionaries, it's not great entrepreneurs, it's not makers of insanely great technology. It's pretty bright people who came from Baltimore and Chicago and Springfield and wherever, who found themselves in the right place at the right time and managed not to follow up the opportunity.
You've now been working on this company for just about as long as you worked anywhere. One of the obvious stories of the electronics revolution is entrepreneurs become serial entrepreneurs. Do you do something else after this?
I think that what I do after this is that I run this company. I think that this is the professional experience of a lifetime.
Let me ask you something. You're in your mid-40s now. You've been doing this now been in the game for 20 plus years. If a 20-year-old Tom Siebel came to you right now, you know, and wants to get into .com, you know, some kind of e-commerce thing or something, what would you tell him? What advice would you give him, given all that you've learned the last 20 years?
I think today that, you know, and I work with a number of these people every day. I think that I would go to work for a larger company for a few years, and I would learn how it's done. I would see how it's managed, and I would learn some skills, and then I would do it. So I think first I would go to work for a Hewlett-Packard. I would go to work for an IBM. I would go to work for a Sun. I'd go to work for a Siebel Systems. I'd go to work for a high-quality, well-managed company, and I would learn how it's done.
See how
I would learn
bureaucracy
some
works
skill,
and how it works well, how it doesn't work
sales
well.
organizations and marketing organizations, and not only learn what's done right, learn what's done wrong. I think maybe that's the most important thing you learn at one of these companies is what they do wrong. And then take that out and go. I don't think right out of college I would do one of these startups.
How do you know when to get out of the big company, though? I mean, they throw all the blandishments at you, you know, the nice office and the secretary and flying on the corporate jet. You know, even when you're 25, they're doing that to you if you're doing well. At what moment do you know when to walk out?
These entrepreneurs know. They just know it's just, you know, they have a biological clock, entrepreneurial clock in there ticking, and they just go do it. And when the time comes, you just got to go do it. You might succeed, you might fail, but, you know, I think that when that moment comes, they move.